Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the TED in Your Head podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. I am your host, Ted Moreno, certified hypnotherapist and high performance coach. And in this podcast, we talk about how to get rid of the stuff that stops you from health, happiness, and success. And I'll tell you what, most of that stuff is right up here in our heads. And once we start moving that stuff, the stinking thinking, self-limiting beliefs, negative habits, once we start moving that stuff out of the way, now we're on the path to personal transformation. And that's what I'm up to. If that sounds like something you're interested in, I'll tell you how to get in touch with me at the end of today's podcast. But for now, let's get into today's episode, which is how to create the perfect day. How does that sound? Does that sound compelling enough to you? The perfect day. Now, in recent episodes of the TED in Your Head podcast, I've been talking about the epidemic of overwhelm, which I call the modern day trance, and how to keep ourselves from slipping into what I call walking hypnosis. For many of us with jobs, kids, homes, families, life can feel like an endless list of responsibilities, chores, and things we have to do, right? The have tos, the got tos, the need tos. And then, of course, there are the unexpected interruptions, distractions, little fires that seem to pop out of nowhere. So in the middle of all that, how do we create the perfect day? And how do we have more of those kind of days? Well, let's start with a simple question. What is a perfect day? Now, your answer may be different from mine, but I think that most of us would agree that a perfect day probably includes some of these qualities. So, a sense of flow, feeling in the zone, right? Being in the zone is a state of focused engagement where you're fully present, time seems to disappear, and things feel natural, effortless, and flowing. Another quality of a perfect day would be ease rather than struggle, productivity without stress, fun and enjoyment, just the right amount of challenge, meaningful connection with people, nature, or life itself, and being fully present and appreciating the experience of being alive. Now, a day like this doesn't happen by accident. I mean, it could, but really, if we want to have more days like this, they must be created. We must create them. Now, it's important to acknowledge that not every day will be perfect. Sometimes life and perhaps the universe has other plans. But I do believe we can increase the likelihood of having more days that feel this way. Now, I don't think the perfect day should be reserved only for vacations, weekends, or special occasions. It can happen in the middle of a work week. A perfect day isn't necessarily exciting, extraordinary, or problem free. In fact, I would suggest to you some of the best days are quite ordinary. What makes a perfect day is often the feeling that comes with it. A perfect day feels fulfilling. At the end of the day, you feel like your time was well spent. You gave attention to what mattered. You were productive when needed, present when it counted, and connected to yourself and others. Fulfillment is different from happiness. Happiness can come and go. Fulfillment is the deeper sense that you lived your day in a way that was meaningful to you. The key is being intentional. Now, it starts the night before. Creating the perfect day begins before your head hits the pillow the night before. Here's where you start with intention. Ask yourself, how do you want tomorrow to feel? What would make it a great day? Take a few minutes to imagine the day unfolding the way you'd like it to. And check in with yourself. Do you have a plan? Are you aware of meetings, appointments, phone calls, or commitments that you've already agreed to have? Do you know when you need to get up, where you need to be, and how long it will take to get you there? Now, these may seem like kind of mundane small details, but scrambling for information first thing in the morning or throughout the day can quickly derail an otherwise smooth day. Take some time to lay out your clothes. Pack what you need. Get organized. A little preparation goes a long way. Now, this is all kind of common sense stuff, but it's a lot of stuff that we don't think about. And it's the things we don't think about that don't create space for what I like to call a perfect day. And remember, a perfect day isn't always about productivity. Maybe your intention is to be more spontaneous. Maybe it's to slow down, relax, or spend quality time with someone you love. The specific intention matters less than having one. So, what else? How about a good night's sleep? You've heard me talk about sleep before, and for good reason. When we're rested, life feels more manageable. When we're exhausted, even minor inconveniences can feel overwhelming. Enough said. And I'm going to put a link into the blog post of this podcast where you can see other podcasts and videos about sleep. Next, start the day on purpose. The way you begin your morning can set the tone for everything that follows. Please avoid the jackrabbit start, jumping out of bed and immediately rushing into the day. That doesn't lend itself to a good day. Instead, give yourself a little breathing room. Review your intention. Practice gratitude. Repeat a few positive affirmations. Take a walk, stretch, meditate, pray. So even if your morning routine is 5 minutes or 10 minutes, that's better than nothing. See what you can do, whatever works for you. The goal is to begin the day consciously rather than reactively. Now, next, you want to know yourself. One of the keys to creating the perfect day is knowing yourself. Be clear about what works for you and what doesn't. So, for example, what helps you feel calm, focused, energized, and productive? What throws you off track? Maybe too much social media leaves you anxious, or the news. Maybe skipping breakfast makes you feel irritable. Maybe saying yes to too many requests leaves you exhausted and resentful. On the other hand, maybe a morning walk energizes you. Maybe quiet time helps you think clearly. Maybe spending time outdoors improves your mood. So the more aware you become of what supports your well-being as well as what undermines it, the easier it becomes to design days that work for you instead of against you. Next, you want to look for what's good. As you move through your day, train yourself to notice what's working. Notice beauty. Notice kindness. Notice opportunities. Encourage yourself instead of criticizing yourself. Personally, I avoid news media first thing in the morning. I also do my best to stay out of the social media doom spiral. Yes, the world can be a challenging place, but I don't want to fill my mind with chaos before I've even had breakfast. The truth is, most of us have far more good in our lives than we realize. Sometimes we just need to remember to look for it. Next, we want to practice acceptance. No matter how well you prepare, things won't always go according to plan. You will encounter delays. You'll encounter difficult situations. You'll encounter difficult people. That's life. The difference is that with the right mindset, adequate sleep, decent nutrition, and a clear intention, most problems become much easier to handle. When we're overwhelmed, sleep deprived, disorganized, and hungry, every little inconvenience feels like a catastrophic, huge pain in the butt. When we're grounded, it usually feels like something we can manage. Let's talk about protecting your time. Time is your most valuable resource. You got to protect it. Learn to say no when necessary. Not every request deserves an immediate response. You can always say, well, let me think about it, or I'll get back to you on that. Not every email needs to be answered right now. Not every text message is an emergency. Of course, some things require urgent attention, but most things don't. Whenever possible, batch your communications. In other words, return calls, answer emails, and respond to messages during designated times. instead of allowing them to interrupt your day continuously. Sometimes I'll call people, get their voicemail, and their voicemail will say something like, or their voicemail message will say something like, I return calls between 2 and 4. I think that's awesome. Now I know that I expect to hear from them between 2 and 4. I like that. And it probably is working really good for them. We also want to work with our energy. Work with your energy. Another important question to ask yourself is, when do you have the most energy? Some people do their best thinking first thing in the morning, like me. Others don't really hit stride until the afternoon. Some people are naturally creative in the evening. You want to pay attention to your own rhythms. If possible, schedule your most important tasks during the hours when you feel most alert, focused, and energized. Too many people try to force themselves into someone else's schedule instead of working with their natural energy patterns. The perfect day often comes from working with yourself instead of fighting against yourself. You know what? Let me repeat that again. I think that's really important. The perfect day often comes from working with yourself instead of fighting against yourself. Sometime during the day, to have the perfect day, we want to do what lifts our spirits. All work and no play doesn't just make us dull, it makes us crazy, and it makes life feel smaller. Every day should contain at least a little bit of joy. Take a walk, read a book, listen to music, play an instrument, call someone you care about, spend time in nature. Do something that reminds you that life is more than checking items off a list. Fun isn't a luxury, it's part of a well lived life. Finally, end the day intentionally. How do you want your day to end? With family? With friends? With a little quiet alone time? Be clear about when you will stop working and begin winding down. Give yourself permission to transition from doing to simply being. And before you go to sleep, spend a few minutes reflecting on the day. This is something I do, and it really, really helps me. So I'm in bed and I ask myself, what went well today? What am I grateful for? And what would I like to do differently tomorrow? What helped make today a good day? Reflection helps transform experience into wisdom. Again, reflection helps transform experience into wisdom. Now, remember, practice makes progress. It's important to remember that creating the perfect day takes practice. You're not going to hear this podcast, make a few changes, and suddenly every day becomes magical. That's not how life works. Creating a better day is a skill. And like any skill, it develops through awareness, experimentation, and repetition. Some days you'll do everything right and life will still throw you a curveball. Other days you'll accidentally create a wonderful day without even trying. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is to become more intentional and more conscious about how you spend your time and energy. Over time, you'll discover what helps you create more days that feel fulfilling, meaningful, and enjoyable. So here's some final thoughts. What does a perfect day look like to you? Take a few minutes. Write it down. Really think about it. Because before you can create the perfect day, you have to imagine it. The perfect day isn't something you wait for. It's something you participate in creating. One choice, one intention, and one moment at a time. The perfect day isn't found somewhere in the future. It's created in the moments we're living right now. So let me leave you with a quote. Forever is composed of nows. That's Emily Dickinson. Remember, you can read this at tedmoreno.com/blog, or you can watch it at youtube.com/@Ted A. Moreno. Please subscribe to my channel and leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. And if you need support creating more perfect days, reach out to me, tedmoreno.com/contact. That's Ted, moreno.com/contact. We'll schedule a time to talk about how we can put your subconscious mind to work for you instead of against you. Thanks so much for listening. And until next time, remember, your mind is powerful. Use it on purpose and take care of yourself because the world needs the best version of you. Thanks again. Take good care. Talk to you soon. Bye.